سلام بفرمایید. Hello and welcome. This video is the first in a series where I will cover each letter of the Persian alphabet, known as the Alef Ba. The goal of this series is to learn firstly how to pronounce and write all 32 letters of the Alef Ba, and secondly to use examples of these letters in commonly used Persian words to expand our useful Persian vocabulary. Now, before we actually jump into specific letters of the Alef Ba, this video serves as an introduction to the series and covers some fundamentals of the Persian alphabet first. So without further ado, let's start. There are four key concepts that I wanted to cover on this page. So starting with the first, Persian is written from right to left. So it's written in the opposite direction as English. Let me start with our first example word in Persian. And the word that I'm going to write is Farsi. And Farsi is the Persian word for Persian. So sort of like how maybe the Germans would say Deutschland instead of Germany. They have a different word. It's kind of a similar idea here, where the word for Persian is Farsi. Now, one thing that I wanted to explain here is that Persian and Farsi in English are essentially interchangeable. They mean the same thing. But there are, so if we have Persian and Farsi, okay, and I'm saying these are kind of the same thing. There's three kind of groups of countries that will speak this language. The first is Iran, so that might be called Iranian. The second is Afghanistan, and they speak a version called Dari. And the third is Tajikistan, and they speak Tajik. And all of these languages are mutually understandable to each other. So if you learn one, you can communicate with folks that speak the other two. And these are all languages that fall under the umbrella of Persian/Farsi languages. Anyway, I've digressed a bit, but all I want you to remember from this point is that Persian, when I wrote this word Farsi, I went in this direction. I went from right to left. Okay, so the second point that I'd like to cover is that Farsi is written in cursive. And really what this means is that in general, there are some exceptions, but in general, when you're writing, the letters are connected. So just to maybe elaborate with this example of the word Farsi, this first part here, that's like the F. That gives us the F. This kind of tall, looks like an English L. That is the A. This third object is the R. Then we have this kind of these three lines that are poking up like this. This is the S. And finally, this is like a E or a Y. In this case, it's giving us the I noise. So you can see that the F and the A are connected, the R is not connected, and the S and the I are connected for this example. Again, try not to focus too much, I guess, on memorizing this specific example, but more on, in general, having an appreciation that as a written language, it is written in cursive and it goes from right to left. Great. The third point that I wanted to cover is that there are 32 letters in the Persian alphabet, and that compares to 26 letters that we have in English. Natural question you might have is, why does Persian have more letters than English? What is this difference? And I can think of a few reasons that answers this question. The first is that some Persian letters don't have corresponding letters in English. So what do I mean by this? We have in English this kind of CH. sound, right? Like the ch in chair. Now, in Persian, we actually have our own letter for this specific sound, and it's the che, which looks something like this. Okay, and then another example of a Persian letter that doesn't have a corresponding letter in English would be something like, it's kind of like a KH. It's pronounced like a khe, a khe, and this one looks like this. It looks quite similar to the che, except the position of the dots are different. So probably another lesson we can take away here is that a lot of letters in Persian look quite similar, but the positioning of the dots can change the letter. But again, we're going to go through every letter in detail, so don't worry about memorizing these specific letters, but just having an appreciation that there are different letters and different letters to English. And different sounds to English, which is part of the explanation for why we have more letters in Persian compared to English. And then the second reason is that some sounds have multiple letters. So let me just use some space up here. So we have the letter sod, which looks something like this. Okay, we have the letter sin, which looks something like this. And we have the letter se, which looks something like this. So we had sod, sin, and se. And all three of these are more or less something similar to an English S. And you can think of this as something like how S and C, the letter S and C in English, sometimes make the same sound and are more or less interchangeable. It's a similar idea here, which contributes to these, extra letters in Persian. Okay, and then the final point that I wanted to make is that letters can have multiple forms. So what do I mean by this? I guess conceptually it's somewhat similar to upper and lowercase in English, but it doesn't operate exactly the same way. Let's just jump through an example here. So we have this letter here at the start. So I want to circle it here in yellow. We had this fe, right? And essentially because this was a lowercase, the form that it took, and I misspoke there when I said lowercase, but it's in the form it takes at the start of a sentence and when it's connecting to another letter. So it looks like this, right? And we happened to attach an R to it, which made it far. We attached an Alef. Now, if this F sound, this fe, was isolated or at the end of the word, it would look pretty similar, but it would just have a little hook at the end like that. And please note that this little hook, this is still just part of the fe. It is different to what we see here, which is this longer, much longer hook is actually its own letter, and that is the Aleph, which was making it fa. Again, these are just examples meant to illustrate these broader concepts. Don't worry about memorizing these examples right now. If some of it absorbs, great, but just try to keep in mind kind of the 4 bullet points on the left. That's all we need to understand at this point. Okay, so the final page for this video, just want to cover the concept of vowels in Persian. Broadly in Persian, we have 6 vowels. 3 short vowels and 3 long vowels. So what do I mean by short and long vowels? If I just start by drawing the short vowels, we have an A, we have an E, and we have an O. Okay, A, E, O. And essentially, the A is a diagonal going from top right to bottom left, and it goes above the letter. The E is essentially the same as an A, but it goes below the letter. And the O, it uses this kind of looks like an English 9, and it also goes above a letter. So let's just do an example. I think it's always good to do an example to clarify. So we have this letter. We'll use this letter here, and this is be, which corresponds to an English B. Okay, so let's draw a couple of bears. And again, I encourage you to draw along. It can be really helpful to start practicing early and getting familiar with these strokes. Okay, so we have 3 bears. Now, if I were to add to this bear the A vowel, this becomes a ba, ba. Think about something like the English word bat, like the A in bat, or the A in maybe baffle, baffle. And I hope you're not too baffled by my explanation. The second, if we add the accent, as I said, it's like the same kind of shape, but below. This is the be. Okay, so this is kind of like the E in bit, bit, or the E in bell, bell. And then finally, we can add the or, and this goes above as well. And this is like the O in board, board, or bone, bone, kind of like these vowel sounds. Now, one interesting point to note about the short vowels is that typically we include them in elementary stages of learning, so when you're just getting started with the Farsi alphabet, and of course this is to help learners understand the sounds of Persian words. But in more advanced Persian texts, you usually don't include the short vowels. So, I've written these ba, this be, this bo. You wouldn't actually typically show these vowels. You wouldn't show them. So the question you might be asking is, well, how does this work? What does this mean? And the best example I can give is just if I wrote something like this in English. Okay. Bear with me while I just finish writing this. Okay. Now, what this is trying to say is you can still understand this, right? This is a NDR. So maybe you can't understand this, but only because of my handwriting and not because we're missing the vowels. And yeah, conceptually, it's something similar going on here, where we don't need the short vowels. We can still understand the meaning of a word without including them. Okay, let's move on to the three the three long vowels. So these are, there's 3 of them. There's an A, there is an E, and there is an U. U. So again, if I take my be example, I'm going to draw 3 bears. Bear, bear. What we can do is we can add these long vowels. And in the case of long vowels, we actually do show them. So it's not like the short vowels where you exclude them. So in this case, we have the B with an R. This makes a ba noise. So this is more like the A in a word like ball, ball, or maybe the A in the word like father, father, like these types of A's. And if you recall, we had this, if I just jump back here to give an example, we had this ba, ba. This was like bat, baffle, not ball, father. So that's kind of, I hope that pronunciation clarifies the difference between these. The second is a B. If I just jump back to my yellow pen, B, something like this. And this is like the E in actually the word be, like literally be, and also maybe something like the double E in the word feel, feel. So again, let's contrast this to what we had, the kind of similar short vowel that we had previously gone through. We had this be, be, bet, bell, be, feel. It's like a, e. And then finally, and while I have this pen in this teal color, let me just write this bo back. Let's add the oo, oo. And you can probably kind of guess now this pattern of what's happening here. So we had previously a bo, like a board or a bone. This is like a boo, boo, sort of like the double O in the word boom, boom, or maybe the word noodle, noodle. Okay, that is the end of the video. I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in our future videos where we'll actually jump into each letter of the alphabet and learn some common words together. خدا حافظ.